Section 1. The Aftermath of Midway. June 7, 1942. Aboard the heavy cruiser, Nagato, Western Pacific. The sea is calm, almost offensively so. A light wind ripples the water, carrying the smell of fuel oil and smoke that refuses to fade. Vice Admiral Matome Ugaki stands on the bridge wing, hands clasped behind his back, staring at the empty horizon. Somewhere beyond it lie the wrecks of 4 Japanese fleet carriers, Akagi, Kega, Soryu, and Hiryu, the proud heart of the Kido Butai, gone in a single, shattering day. The radios are quiet now. Too quiet. Ugaki exhales slowly. The battle is over. The loss is undeniable. But beneath the shock, beneath the grief and anger, there is certainty, a belief shared by nearly every senior officer in the Imperial Japanese Navy. The Americans cannot replace this. Not quickly, not on this scale. Carrier warfare, as Japan understands it, is an elite art. Ships take years to design, lay down, launch, and train for. Air groups take even longer. Pilots are cultivated carefully, almost reverently, through a system that prizes perfection over quantity. Japan has lost something irreplaceable, but so, surely, has the United States. Reports coming in suggest that the Americans lost Yorktown, perhaps others damaged. Their carriers, fewer to begin with, should now be crippled. It is the natural math of naval war. Steel and men cannot simply be conjured from thin air. Ugaki turns to his chief of staff and speaks quietly. "The enemy has struck a painful blow," he says, "but it cannot be sustained." Around him, officers nod. The logic is sound. It is comforting. What they do not know, what no one aboard Nagato can yet imagine, is that the enemy's shipyards are already moving, that keels are already laid, that slipways on the American west and east coasts are alive with sparks, noise, and men working in shifts that do not end. For Japan, Midway is a disaster. For America, it is a starting gun. In Tokyo, days later, naval planners pore over casualty lists and damage assessments. The loss of 4 fleet carriers is unprecedented. But still, the mood is not despair. The Imperial Navy still has powerful ships, experienced commanders, and most importantly, time. Time, they believe, is now their ally. Pre-war intelligence estimates place American carrier construction on a cautious, peacetime scale. New ships would require years. Training pipelines would bottleneck. The industrial base, though impressive, is assumed to be slow to adapt to the demands of total war. These assumptions shape everything that follows. Japanese strategy pivots toward consolidation, defensive perimeters, attrition, decisive engagements fought on favorable terms. If America must rebuild before it can strike again, Japan can dictate the tempo. Then something unsettling begins to happen. In August 1942, reports filter through from the South Pacific. American carriers are active again. Not timidly, not defensively, aggressively. At Guadalcanal, U.S. naval aviation appears where it should not be. Too soon, too confident. The names cause a stir. Enterprise, Saratoga, Wasp. Ships that should be damaged, under repair, or absent entirely are suddenly present. Flying sorties, launching strikes, losing planes, and replacing them. Rear Admiral Taman Yamaguchi, before his death at Midway, had once warned that American industry should not be underestimated. Now his words echo uncomfortably through naval staff rooms. Still, the true shock has not yet arrived. October 1942. Newport News Shipbuilding, Virginia. The noise is constant. Hammers ring against steel. Welding torches spit white-hot sparks. Cranes swing massive sections of hull into place with practiced ease. Men shout measurements over the din. Others move with clipboards, checking, rechecking, pushing the schedule forward. On the slipway, rests a shape that barely resembles a ship to the untrained eye, a skeleton of steel ribs and deck plates. But the men here know exactly what it is, an Essex-class aircraft carrier. She is not the first, and she will not be the last. Designed even before Pearl Harbor, the Essex-class represents something fundamentally different from earlier American carriers. Bigger, faster, more resilient. Designed for mass production, components standardized, construction streamlined, lessons from early war damage already incorporated. This is not craftsmanship in the old sense. This is industrial warfare. Back in Japan, intelligence officers received fragmented reports about new American carriers under construction. The numbers seem inflated, exaggerated, possibly propaganda. Analysts revise estimates downward, then upward again. Still, the scale feels unreal. One carrier launched every few months? Impossible. And yet, by December 1942, USS Essex slides into the water. By mid-1943, she is operational, not alone, but as the lead ship of a growing class. Japanese commanders begin to notice a pattern. American carrier task forces are no longer singular, precious assets. They appear in groups. They absorb damage and continue operations. When one withdraws, another takes its place. Losses that once would have forced a pause now barely register. At sea, Japanese aviators encounter fresh American air groups flying from decks they do not recognize. Pilots who are less experienced, but numerous. Tactics are simpler, more standardized, more forgiving. The Americans are not chasing perfection. They are chasing continuity, and slowly, inexorably, the realization begins to take shape. The United States is not rebuilding its carrier force. It is expanding it. While Japan counts ships, America counts output. While Japan mourns losses, America schedules launches. While Japan fights to preserve a fleet, America prepares to replace it, again and again and again. For the first time since the war began, a dangerous question hangs unspoken in Japanese command circles. What happens if the enemy can lose carriers faster than we can sink them? No one yet dares to answer. Section 2. The numbers that would not stop. November 26, 1943. Truk Lagoon. Rain lashes the anchorage, blurring the outlines of battleships and cruisers at rest. Inside a dimly lit operations room, Captain Sadatoshi Tomioka studies a situation map pinned to the bulkhead. Red markers denote American carrier task forces. Too many of them now. Each one neatly labeled, each one supported by escorts, oilers, and supply ships that seem to appear out of nowhere. Tomioka frowns. The markers are being moved more often than before. Faster, with confidence. Radio intercepts tell the same story. Call signs multiply. Flight operations extend late into the night. American carriers are not merely present, they are persistent. When one task force pulls back, another pushes forward, as if following a timetable invisible to Japanese planners. And behind them lies a truth Japan is only beginning to grasp. They are no longer fighting a fleet. They are fighting a schedule. In Tokyo, naval intelligence finally confirms what had once seemed unthinkable. American shipyards have delivered not one or two new carriers, but an entire class. Essex-class carriers, commissioned at a pace that defies pre-war estimates. By the end of 1943, USS Essex, Yorktown, CV-10, Intrepid, Bunker Hill, and Hornet, CV-12, are operational. More are fitting out. More still are under construction. Each is larger than Japan's fleet carriers. Each carries more aircraft. Each is built with damage control lessons learned in blood. Japanese planners had assumed that American losses at Coral Sea and Midway would slow operations for years. Instead, they have accelerated them. The realization hits hardest during the Gilbert and Marshall Islands campaigns. American carriers strike with overwhelming force, withdraw briefly, then return, often with additional decks added to the lineup. The tempo is relentless. Japanese defenders are hit from multiple directions, at multiple times, by carriers they cannot keep track of. A staff officer writes bitterly in his notebook, "The enemy has learned to rotate his strength. We have only one throw of the dice." February 17th, 1944. Operation Hailstone. Truck, once considered the Gibraltar of the Pacific, burns. From dawn to dusk, American carrier aircraft tear into the lagoon. Transports explode. Oil slicks spread across the water. Aircraft are destroyed on the ground faster than they can take off. Japanese anti-aircraft fire fills the sky, but it is scattered, overwhelmed. Watching from the hills, a junior naval officer realizes something chilling. The carriers launching these attacks are not risking everything. They are part of a system that can afford to strike, withdraw, and strike again. If one is damaged, another will take its place. The Japanese fleet, once concentrated and decisive, now feels brittle by comparison. Every loss hurts. Every loss is permanent. Across the Pacific, in Puget Sound and Brooklyn, American shipyards operate day and night. Floodlights turn darkness into artificial daylight. Women welders replace men sent overseas. Hull sections arrive by rail, prefabricated, slotted into place with practiced efficiency. The Essex-class design allows parallel construction. While one section is assembled, another is outfitted, another tested. Bottlenecks are eliminated, delays absorbed, schedules tightened. A carrier that once might have taken 5 years now reaches the fleet in under 2, and training pipelines expand just as quickly. Pilots are no longer groomed individually to near perfection. They are trained to standard, to doctrine, to teamwork. Losses are expected and planned for. Squadrons rotate, rebuild, return. Japanese commanders note the change with unease. American pilots are not always as skilled as veterans of the WWII, but they are good enough. And there are always more. By mid-1944, the disparity becomes impossible to ignore. At the Battle of the Philippine Sea, Japanese naval aviation is shattered. Carrier decks that once launched elite airmen now send up undertrained pilots flying outdated aircraft. They are met by waves of American fighters launched from carriers whose names blur together in after-action reports. Essex-class carriers dominate the horizon. They absorb strikes. They lose planes. They repair decks overnight. They replenish ammunition at sea. They refuel without stopping operations. Japanese commanders watch their air groups evaporate in what will be remembered as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Afterward, one officer reportedly mutters, "It is no longer a contest of skill. It is arithmetic." The arithmetic is brutal. By late 1944, more than 20 Essex-class carriers are in service or nearing completion. Each one represents not just steel and engines, but the infrastructure behind it: oilers, repair ships, replacement aircraft, trained crews waiting in reserve. Japan cannot match this. Shipyards are bombed. Steel is scarce. Fuel is rationed to the point of paralysis. New carriers like Taiho are lost almost as soon as they enter service, taking irreplaceable crews with them. American losses, once feared, now barely slow operations. When one carrier is hit, another fills the gap. When one air group is mauled, another rotates in. The Pacific has become a conveyor belt, and Japan is trapped on the wrong end of it. For the first time, senior Japanese officers begin to speak openly of inevitability, not defeat. Inevitability, because no matter how many carriers they sink, more are already on the way. Section 3. The moment the balance shattered. October 23, 1944. Philippine Sea, east of Leyte. Dawn breaks pale and humid, the sea unnaturally calm. On the bridge of the carrier USS Essex, Captain James L. Holloway watches the wind ripple across the water as deck crews prepare the morning launch. Engines warm. Deck handlers move with practiced urgency, yellow shirts signaling, green shirts crouched by aircraft wheels. red shirts standing ready with fire extinguishers. The flight deck is alive. Below deck, pilots sit strapped into their cockpits, oxygen masks hanging loose, hands resting on throttles. Many are barely in their 20s. Some have never seen combat before this month. None of them doubt that they will fly today, and tomorrow, and the day after. Across the sea, Japanese commanders are preparing for what they believe may be their final chance. The operation is bold, desperate. A multi-pronged naval strike designed to draw American carriers north while Japanese surface forces smash the invasion fleet at Leyte Gulf. It is complex enough to succeed only once, and only if the Americans behave as expected. They do not. As reports come in, American commanders realize something extraordinary. Even if they take losses, even if several carriers are damaged, they can afford to keep fighting. Task forces rotate seamlessly. Fast carriers strike and withdraw. Escort carriers protect the landing beaches. Oilers refuel fleets at sea, allowing operations to continue without pause. Japanese planners had counted on exhaustion. Instead, they encounter endurance. When aircraft from USS Franklin and USS Enterprise strike Japanese ships in the Sibuyan Sea, the damage is devastating. When Japanese planes retaliate, some American carriers are hit, but none are removed from the fight for long. Fires are contained, decks are patched, aircraft are relaunched. Damage control teams move with drilled precision. Bulkheads are sealed, flooding is isolated. The carriers live. October 25, 1944. Off Cape Engano. Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa watches his decoy force draw American carriers northward just as planned. His decks are nearly empty, a sacrifice intended to lure the enemy away from Leyte. And the Americans come. But as waves of aircraft rise from the horizon, Ozawa understands too late what has changed. They come in numbers no Japanese carrier force could have generated, even at its peak. Squadron after squadron arrives, attacking from different altitudes, different directions, with ruthless coordination. Bombs tear into flight decks. Torpedoes slam into hulls. Fires spread unchecked aboard carriers that lack the damage control doctrine the Americans have refined. By nightfall, Ozawa's force is wrecked. His carriers lie burning or sinking. Their loss not just tactical, but symbolic. The era of Japanese carrier dominance ends not with a single decisive blow, but under the crushing weight of American continuity. In Tokyo, the news lands like a physical blow. Reports confirm what officers already feared. The enemy's carrier fleet is now effectively inexhaustible. Even the loss of multiple American carriers would not halt operations for more than weeks, perhaps days. Japan has no answer to this. Fuel shortages ground training squadrons. Replacement pilots arrive with barely a fraction of the hours once considered minimum. New aircraft designs cannot be produced fast enough. And even when they are, there are too few trained men left to fly them. The Americans, by contrast, are learning faster than they are losing. Each engagement produces lessons that are immediately folded back into training manuals, deck procedures, and ship design. Radar coordination improves. Fighter direction becomes more precise. Anti-aircraft fire grows denser and deadlier. The carriers evolve while the war is still being fought. By early 1945, the pattern is unmistakable. At Iwo Jima, carriers operate so close to shore that their guns can be heard from the beaches. When one task force rotates out, another takes its place without interruption. Air support is constant, relentless, unavoidable. At Okinawa, the strain intensifies. Kamikaze attacks strike carriers with terrifying force. Several are badly damaged. Some burn for days, but even here the system holds. Damaged ships limp back to repair yards. Replacement carriers slide into their positions. Fresh air groups launch as if nothing has changed. Japanese pilots die believing they are crippling American power. They are not. They are only slowing it, briefly. A captured Japanese naval officer, interrogated aboard an American escort carrier, is finally blunt. "We believed if we sank enough carriers, you would stop," he says quietly. But you never stopped. The truth has become unavoidable. The United States has transformed naval warfare from a contest of fleets into a contest of production. Strategy is now written not just in charts and orders, but in shipyard output schedules and training pipelines. Every sunk carrier is already accounted for. Every loss has been anticipated. Every gap will be filled. The Pacific War is no longer about who strikes harder. It is about who can continue striking longest. And Japan no longer can. Somewhere at sea, another Essex-class carrier is commissioning. Another deck is being painted. Another air group is preparing to launch. The Japanese commanders finally understand what they are facing. An enemy whose strength does not peak. It accumulates. Section 4. The War That Would Not Pause. February 10th, 1945. Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, Washington. Snow falls lightly on gray water as welders spark along the hull of a brand new carrier. The name is still covered, the paint barely dry. Inside the shipyard offices, calendars are marked not by months, but by milestones: keel laid, launch date, shakedown cruise, deployment. This carrier is not exceptional. That is the point. Across the United States, the same scene plays out in Newport News, Brooklyn, Philadelphia. Assembly lines that once produced automobiles now turn out turbines, elevators, arresting gear. Crews work in shifts around the clock. When one team sleeps, another takes its place. The war does not slow. It accelerates. Thousands of miles away, Japanese naval intelligence officers sit in dim rooms, studying silhouettes and incomplete photographs. Each new American carrier is cataloged, assigned a number, placed into estimates. The problem is not identifying them. It is keeping up. Reports that once shocked now arrive weekly. Another Essex-class commissioned. Another air group operational. Another fast carrier task force formed. What was once a handful of capital ships has become a rotating system. Fleets within fleets, able to absorb punishment without losing momentum. One officer writes bitterly in his notes. "We count their carriers as one counts waves." March 18th, 1945. Western Pacific off Japan. American carriers strike the home islands themselves. Airfields burn. Warships are sunk in harbor. Factories are hit from the sea, an unimaginable reversal from 1941, when Japan had believed its island barrier impenetrable. On the flight deck of USS Yorktown, CV-10, Lieutenant Commander Robert Hampton signals his squadron forward. The deck shakes as aircraft roar into the sky, one after another, disappearing into low clouds. The rhythm is relentless. Launch, recover, refuel, rearm, repeat. The Japanese response is desperate now. Fuel shortages limit sorties. Pilots are rushed through training. Kamikaze attacks become doctrine. A last attempt to trade lives for ships. And yet, even suicide cannot break the system. Carriers are hit. Men die. Decks are torn open by explosions. But the fleet adapts again. Combat air patrols thicken. Radar pickets extend the warning time. Damage control teams become faster, calmer, almost clinical. The carriers endure. April 7th, 1945. East China Sea. The battleship Yamato sails on her final mission, a one-way voyage toward Okinawa, with barely enough fuel to reach the island. Japanese commanders know she will not return. They hope only that her sacrifice will cost the Americans dearly. American carriers detect her hours after departure. The response is automatic. Hundreds of aircraft launch in waves, their pilots briefed with calm efficiency. Torpedo bombers skim the waves. Dive bombers roll in from altitude. Fighters strafe decks already erupting in fire. The Yamato dies beneath a storm she cannot fight. The largest battleship ever built is destroyed not by another capital ship, but by carrier aviation. Aviation made possible by an industrial base that never stopped feeding the front. For Japanese naval officers watching the reports arrive, the symbolism is crushing. Even their greatest weapon is now obsolete. By summer 1945, the reality is undeniable. Japan no longer faces an American fleet. It faces an American process. Carriers rotate in and out of action with mechanical precision. Crews are rested, aircraft are replaced. Tactics are refined between strikes. When one task force pulls back, another advances without pause. The sea itself seems occupied, and behind it all, the assembly lines continue. A Japanese admiral, interviewed years later, would describe the moment of clarity. "It was not Midway," he said. "It was when we realized that sinking an American carrier no longer mattered." That realization spreads quietly through what remains of Japan's naval leadership. The numbers cannot be reversed. The training pipeline cannot be rebuilt. Fuel cannot be conjured out of scarcity. Every month, the Americans grow stronger. Every month, Japan grows weaker. There is no decisive battle left to fight, only time. And time now belongs entirely to the United States. August 1945. Western Pacific. American carriers sit at anchor, their decks crowded with aircraft, their crews waiting. Engines are idle. The sea is calm. The war ends not with a final carrier battle, but with silence. When the surrender is announced, many sailors look around in disbelief. Their ships are intact. Their air groups are full. Replacement carriers are still en route. The machine is still running. In the aftermath, Japanese officers speak candidly for the first time. They admit what they could not during the war, that their strategy had assumed limits that did not exist, that they had believed America would fight like an empire. Cautious, finite, restrained. Instead, America fought like a factory. The Essex-class carriers were not miracles of engineering. They were miracles of repetition. 24 of them entered service between 1942 and 1945. Each one a reminder that the Pacific War was decided not only by courage or skill, but by an ability to replace loss faster than the enemy could inflict it. Japanese commanders had gambled everything on early blows. They never imagined the war would continue after success. It did, because somewhere, even as carriers burned and men died, another hull was already sliding down a slipway. Another deck was being painted. Another air group was training. The war at sea was never going to be decided by who struck first. It was decided by who could keep striking forever.